Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
Well, it's a rugby episode this week on Jandals in Japan. We haven't had one for a little while, so I feel
I
it's
know.
okay.
So excited to bring a rugby episode. Yay.
And if you don't like rugby, you should still keep listening because our guest is so fun. Such a good guy. You will just really enjoy this episode anyway, even if you hate rugby. Promise.
He's hilarious. He drops jokes all the time and puns and things like that, and he's super fun to deal with. Doug.
Who is it? Doug.
Doug Picken. And Doug is the DynaBoars rugby team's translator. He's not only that, he also hosts and sometimes co-hosts the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast, and we've had lots of fun collaborating with him across both of our podcasts. It's been awesome. His earlier days are up near you, right, in Fukushima?
Yes.
Aizu Wakamatsu, I think. His mum's from there. Yeah, and his dad is Scottish. But he grew up in Rotorua, or Rotorua as the Americans say, right? So super guy, totally, university academics there, but his devotion to sport, right, and kicking everything he does to touch to make it all sort of brilliant is what Doug does. Can't wait to tell everybody and show everybody this episode.
So all the things that he sees as a translator, he really sees what goes on in a rugby team across all aspects. So he has a lot of gold to share with us today. So I hope you enjoy hearing from Doug.
Thanks. Go for it. Ikimasho!
Ikimasho! Kia ora, Doug. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show today.
Kia ora. Ohayou gozaimasu. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we like to start with our warm-up question. Can you share one piece of rugby lingo in Japanese we should know if we want to be following what's going on here in the rugby world in Japan?
Yes. So there's a few, a lot of them, like rak is laku. Everything's, a lot of them are, just English words. But one that they say in Japan that I've never really heard anywhere else is no side or no saido, which you might have heard before, but it's, I don't know where it came from, but like how in rugby, once it's done, there's no sides, there's no, you're all nakama or you're all friends again. So everyone, shakes hands. And I think it's something that doesn't happen as much in sport over here as maybe, it does in New Zealand maybe. So it's something that people have noticed over here in rugby that, there's no sides after the final whistle. So everyone will say no side for the final whistle.
And I hear the commentators saying that too now on TV. When the whistle goes, they're like, no side. I'm like, okay, it's merged into even the media too, right?
I think it's, Japanese English where everyone thinks it's, that's what they say in New Zealand or England. But I think it must have come from someone saying, there's no sides after rugby or something. And
wasn't there a movie, No Side?
Maybe
a documentary. I think there was, and maybe it came from there. I'm not sure, but I know there was something. We have to look into that.
It's not necessarily rugby terminology that we use on the field, but is that one good enough?
Yeah, that's awesome. No, because it does get, like Catherine just said, you hear the commentators say it. Why are they saying that? Right. Okay. Interesting. Did not know that one. Thanks for pulling that one out, Doug.
So it's about all the time I've got, but
Can I ask you one? I love kick to touch. Is that something that is said in Japanese as well?
I think they might say like tachikiku, tachikiku. And like kicking out on the full, they won't say out on the full, they'll say direct tachi. So you're kicking it directly out, like, or sometimes they'll even shorten it just to, direct to this or something, and just means they kicked it out on the full. So
perfect. When I remember in law school, one of our lecturers used to talk about, we'll just kick that one to touch. And so it became a real thing that we all said as, budding lawyers, we all talked about kicking something to touch when it meant, I guess, we'll leave that one as it is and move on. but he got a rep for that, so it was quite fun. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Those things I think are the hardest to translate because you can't translate them, direct. If I just say, "Oh, you're kicking something to the touchline," in that sense, everyone will be like, "What are you talking about?" So it's yeah. When I heard that, I just got shivers. I was like, "Oh, how am I going to translate that if it was to Japanese people?"
Tachikiki.
Oh, sorry, tachikiku. Yeah.
Tachikiku. Got it. Thank you. What about one of your favourite ones? Come on.
What, from
Come
rugby?
on.
I don't have any from rugby that I can add here, unfortunately. Yeah, no, I've been interested to watch the Rugby World Cup with all of the little hints that come up on the screen with my husband, who is learning to understand and appreciate rugby.
Yep.
He wants to understand it. He's an avid sports watcher, but he's like, I still don't get it. Why are there, it's these various obscure rules about rugby.
Yeah.
Even after having watched the whole Rugby World Cup with all of the hints on the screen along the way, we're still struggling with some of the rules about when you kick it out from behind the 22 and all of this sort of stuff. It's a very intricate game, isn't it, really?
I mean, some of the rules, I watch it, I'm like, I think there was this, but I'll just, if I open my mouth, everyone will think I'm an idiot, so I'll just stay silent.
Well, Doug, as you say on your own podcast, Ikimasho. Did I get that quite right?
Yeah.
The way you say it, but there we
Can
go.
you say it for us?
I never really thought about how I say it. Now I'm over-analyzing myself on how I say it. It was normally just, how do I say it?
Ikimasho. It's kind of like that, isn't it?
Yeah. Ikimasho.
There we go.
I have to imagine the sound, the intro playing, and then when I do it. So.
Oh, good on you. Well, welcome to Doug the Translator. You were born in Japan, grew up a little bit in Japan and in New Zealand, and you got a Bachelor of Science out of University of Auckland, and you are a translator in Japan for the DynaBoars rugby team and host of the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast. We're so happy to have you here. Thank you. We'll be putting your full bio into the show notes, but tell us a little bit more about that background in Japan and New Zealand, your early days of interest in translation and being in this world of rugby translation in Japan.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to finally be on a professional podcast and not one that is like mine where I just make it up as I go. But no, like you said,
come on.
Mum is Japanese. My dad is Kiwi, or half Scottish, but none of us have been to Scotland, so I don't know why I keep saying that. But yeah, my mum and dad met in Australia, and then when she went back to to Japan, Dad followed her over. I was born over there in a small town in Fukushima. And yeah, my mum's from even, a smaller town in the countryside. And I just kind of been back and forth. And I learned my Japanese mainly through my mum, who would always speak to me in Japanese, even when I was in New Zealand. But I'd always reply in English. So my listening was always, I think, better than my speaking. And yeah, just been back and forth. Did 2 years of primary school in Aizu Wakamatsu in Fukushima. And yeah, after uni, came back. And I was just, I guess, wanting to come over before I got a full-time job. I guess I wanted to meet or see all my family over here again before I got a job in New Zealand. And just before I came over, someone asked me if I wanted to, it was actually Tim Harvey, one of your past guests, a friend of mine or a family member of mine knew him and got me introduced to him, and he got me introduced to his agency. They started looking for a job as a translator for me, and while they did that, I taught a bit of English. So I think the only translation I'd done before that was when my cousins had come to New Zealand at the airport or something. I'd, go up to the counter with them and tell them what the lady was saying. So didn't have too much experience, but I was just kind of given the opportunity to try and look for a job, and here we are.
Whoa! And shout out to Tim.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if
thought about that.
I don't know if you can hear that, but
what was that?
Oh no, it was just my ear horn that I've got connected to it as a celebration to Tim.
Well, celebration to Tim. We'll shout him out when we go out live for this one. But how did you know that translation was something you wanted to get into? Or was it just really that introduction, why don't you try it? Someone knew you had it in you and you didn't know yourself, or you really wanted to do that?
I think I always wanted to come to Japan. Every time I'd come over, it was, apart from the 2 years that I spent in primary school, it was normally just like a 2 week holiday or something. So I was always keen to come back, even if it was just for a little bit, to see family, like I said, and experience it as an adult. And I always loved rugby. Growing up, I was into rugby league more, but because my dad was. But then from uni, I started playing a bit of union as well. And obviously, as a Kiwi, you always watch it when it's on TV. And yeah, when someone said this is something that people do, I just thought, oh, well, if I can't be on a rugby team or a professional rugby team as a player, as someone who's, 70 kgs and 100, 68 centimeters or whatever, but maybe I can with my voice. So arrived in Japan in 2015 and kind of gave myself until 2019, where I knew the World Cup was going to be in Japan. So I thought I'll stay until at least then. And if I still don't have a job in translation, then I'll go home. But yeah, luckily before that, I got a chance, and yeah, here we are.
Great. Well, it's good to set a sort of time limit, isn't it, on yourself? It makes you sort of work for things. But you are indeed now the rugby translator for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries Sagamihara DynaBoars team.
Mhm.
Yay, the DynaBoars.
Yay, DynaBoars.
Tell us a bit more about this role. What does it entail for you? What do you do during the week or on a day when you're out in the field?
So yeah, our team has coaches, other staff, analysts like Jess, who's also been on the show, and also obviously players who are from different countries. So my role is pretty much just to repeat what they've said or written or, texted in the opposite language, and just make sure that the message, I guess, that they're trying to get across is, gets across. So normally start every morning with a coach meeting in the morning, and we've got a few Japanese coaches, so I'll just kind of be in the corner of the room with them, translating as all the other coaches are talking. And then you translate for team meetings, other staff meetings, and then on the field, whenever a coach is describing a drill that we're doing or yelling at the players to be good, I repeat that back in Japanese, and then in the huddles at training, I do the same for the players and between the players. So pretty much I don't really have to think for myself. I just repeat what other people say.
And so you just mentioned when the coaches are shouting potentially at the players, you're shouting too, right? Are you becoming them to get that message across?
Yeah, I think that was something I probably struggled with a bit at the start. Because I don't yell like naturally that much.
Right.
Like it's not something that I'd necessarily do. And when I first started, I was 22 or 23, and everyone was pretty much older than me. So I knew in Japan you also have the senpai kohai thing, and I'm the voice of somebody in their 40s, but I'm still 23. So I wasn't sure how it would be taken if I'm yelling at someone who's 30 or 29 or something. And I also didn't want to focus too much on the yelling or how I said it, so much that I wasn't focused on what I had to say. So I think I just trying to find a balance of, obviously, if somebody's yelling and I'm, smiling and saying something really calmly, then that's jarring as well. But I probably don't yell or get as animated. It's maybe somewhere in between where I still know that, I mean, if you're Japanese and you see a foreign person, yelling, that they're not real happy. So it's more about, the message, I think. And so, sorry, very long story short, kind of.
I guess you can do a lot with tone of voice, right? And rather than like volume and
just being stern,
expellatives or whatever. I guess everybody has their own style as well that you probably found as you've gone along and developed your own Doug the translator style.
Yeah. And all coaches or players have their own style or their own way of talking as well. So it definitely gets a lot easier when it's someone that you've known for quite a while. you can kind of, I guess, predict what they're going to say or how they're going to say something, or in this situation, they'll probably react this way. So you can kind of get prepared a bit more, which is definitely helpful.
Absolutely. Wow. I mean, you talked about huddles before. So you're with them in that huddle and out on the field with the coach, sort of shadowing the coach. How does that work between practice and reality of the game?
So yeah, on the practice field, I'm normally following. We got 3 coaches who speak English, or are from New Zealand, and so I'm normally following one of them and just helping, I guess, them out. But we do have huddles on the training field as well. So I'll normally go to one of the huddles and they'll talk about what they want to do next, or what's going well, what's not going well. And I think it kind of helps them practice for in-game as well, so they can get those messages as crisp as possible. And then on game day, I do a similar role before the game when all the players are warming up, and then in the huddle in the dressing room, the captain will say his final word. So yeah, just trying to, I guess, get that point across to the foreigners who are in the huddle. And then I go up to the coach's box after that and kind of relay things that the coach says on the radio, or if any Japanese messages coming back up from the field on the radio, I'll tell the coaches what's being said there. So they could be from medical, if a player's hurt, where they're hurt, or if they can keep going. And also the manager's the one who organizes the replacement. So if somebody's on the ground, then we might tell the manager or the strength and conditioning coach to start getting somebody warmed up or something. So I guess it's just about same job, but just over radios.
What do you like about translating now that you're more in the groove and you've got past those initial stages? What's it that really makes you feel like, yeah, that was great, I really enjoyed that?
I love being able to go out on the field every day, and just the environment of our rugby team. It's got a lot of camaraderie, and it's something that I always loved doing as well. It's what so many people do. They in their spare time, they'll pay fees every year to go on a Tuesday night or a Thursday night to go to training, and then go to a game on Saturday, just to, I guess, be in that group and get exercise, but also enjoy being around teammates. So that's something that I get to do every day, which is really cool. And the level is a lot higher than anything that I would have, been at as a player as well. So just always learning from players, from coaches, because, I'm always relaying what the coaches are saying to each other and everything like that. So I think it all just is really interesting to me on what kind of, I guess, the depth at which everyone kind of talks about rugby, and something that I didn't really notice when I was just watching it as a fan, but just how many things or how much actually goes into the preparation of a week, into the preparation of a season, of a game, and so much that I guess you don't really notice until you're in it. And then also, I just love how, we're allowed to travel Japan with the team. You get to go to a lot of places that I probably wouldn't go to otherwise. Lastly, I guess just actually being out in that environment, in the atmosphere of the crowds and stuff. Japan's got, amazing crowds and amazing support. So just being able to see that and see how much they support our boys is, really, I guess it gives you that motivation to keep working harder, to keep gambareing.
What about people who wouldn't suit being a translator? What have you seen sort of people come in and come and go and they haven't succeeded? What is it about those people that you perhaps notice that doesn't suit rugby translation well, potentially?
So I haven't seen a lot of it directly, because pretty much the whole time I've been translating, I've been kind of the only one there, or I've just had other staff members who can speak both who would help out sometime. But a lot of the stories I hear of, I guess, the reason why I was brought in, or the person before me, a few of them, I guess you hear so many, I guess, so much strategy or so many ways of doing things. And there might be some that as a translator you agree with more than others. So if you get a new coach who has a different way of thinking or a different way of coaching, different philosophy, you see some people, they don't agree with that one. They agree with something that they've seen in the past, and they won't necessarily translate it how they should. Maybe they might put some of their ideas into it. So I think that was, a big strength of mine is that I, don't really know anything about rugby in terms of the strategic, like, how to play it at this level. Whenever I've been out on the field in social rugby, it's just grab the ball and, try not to get tackled. And then afterwards, everyone has a beer. So that's, the level of thinking that I've always been used to. So and then if maybe you're an ex-player who comes in as a translator, you might have all these experiences and you have these beliefs that suddenly you just have to shelve and you have to ignore. So I think that's something that you can maybe sometimes struggle with. And then also with that, even when it's not, if a coach is saying something, maybe because you've heard so much from a coach, sometimes you can think that you know what's best and talk to players and say, oh, you should do this, when, that's not a message from a coach. It could even be the right message, but it shouldn't be coming directly, I guess, from you, because that's not your role. So maybe just being able to understand your role is something that's important. And then in terms of translators who do well in other fields, but maybe not so much in sports, it's probably just it's like a pretty different pressure. You're not necessarily working, like business translators and stuff. They'd have the pressure of working with, millions of dollars and things like that. But I think just the pace of everything you have to do at rugby, you don't want to be the cause of making a 15-minute meeting a 30-minute meeting because you're, too slow. And you also don't want to be the reason why players are fighting with coaches or players versus players because you didn't get their point across. So, and, it's not something that you can take a lot of time with. In training, we might have like a 30-second huddle where the players are trying to get their water, they're trying to give their messages, and you can't tell the coach, oh, wait, I haven't given the message yet. So I guess those kind of pressures are things that, you have to get used to. But once you get used to it, and I think, the most important thing is just if you understand your role, then it makes everything a lot easier, I think.
Gold, absolute gold there. Take yourself out of the equation, your opinions, and leave them at the door when you get to work as a translator in rugby, because, that's not your job. Doesn't matter how much you know or experience as a translator, right? Good point.
I'm always just talking about how I'm just a machine where I listen to some words and then turn them into different words kind of thing. So I don't want there to be that filter in me that I think naturally there's always words that I'd use that a different translator might not use. So I think there's always going to be some kind of filter, but making sure that that filter doesn't change the message, I think, or the idea that the person wants to get across.
Like in the future with AI and that, do you think you could be replaced by AI? Or do you think you bring something beyond that? Just curious.
I've always kind of been saying that I need the podcast to really, succeed, because that's going to be my job after I've got a time limit on how long I can do this. I think rugby, it helps because rugby language is different to English and Japanese. So I think it'll take it a little bit more time for, no one's necessarily trying to make translate machine for rugby. They'll probably do it for business meetings or tourism before that, so I might have a bit more time. But I definitely think in the future it'll be a job that it'll be cheaper, even if it's not 100% the experience that's happening now. Definitely be cheaper. So I think there is a time limit. So I might have to go back to working at KFC like I did at high school.
Oh, I don't think so. I think you're right on saying that there's a different language, right? And trying to copy that, even if they put you through an AI vessel, right, to try and change and try and teach it how Doug speaks, how Doug translates, I think it would still take a little bit of time to catch up with you.
I'd never teach it right. I'd just be giving it wrong information anyway.
Yeah, give wrong information.
Sabotaging.
That's how you save your job. Have you ever had a funny situation on the field or in a huddle where you'd like to tell us about a translation story that you've experienced?
I think the biggest thing is probably just different nuances on languages. So there'll be things a bit like what you said for kick to touch, where you can't just say kick to touch. I'd have to say, I don't know, put it aside or something in Japanese, or let's move on to the next thing. And I think the parts where I feel flustered is when we had a coach at Coca-Cola where I was before, Mitsubishi, who was a Japanese guy who was a very, real famous name in Japanese rugby. But I think because he was such a good player, it kind of came naturally to him. So that made it a bit harder for him to I guess, understand why people weren't getting it straight away. It was harder for him to teach it because for him, it wasn't something he necessarily had to, learn by doing it a lot. I guess it just came more naturally to him. But there were times when just the way that he speaks, it didn't sometimes come across very clearly. And the Japanese players, they were sometimes looking puzzled as well. But all the foreigners are looking at is me, and they're just looking at me, and I'm saying something that doesn't really make sense, and they all think that I'm just, what are you talking about, Doug? But I'm just trying to explain. Oh no, I'm saying what he's saying. It's just that the original source code isn't really making as much sense. So I think that's when I feel flustered, where people think, regardless of what the original message is, if my message doesn't make sense, they don't think it's because the original one isn't making sense. It's like, oh, Doug mustn't have understood it. So I get a bit sweaty.
Yeah, that's quite scary, isn't it? Is there any time like when that happens that you can say any suggestion back to the original source code, or is that something you're not really supposed to do?
I think sometimes I will ask or get clarity on it. So before I've said it, but I guess the only problem when it's Japanese to English, normally because there's a lot more Japanese people, I'll just be doing it at the same time. So I'll just be at the back kind of whispering to the foreign players. So it's a lot harder to stop it. But when I'm speaking English to Japanese, it's more the coach will say a sentence and I'll say that, or you'll say a phrase. He'll keep talking until he stops and then I'll, repeat that kind of thing. So there are a few times when the coach might say Wednesday when I know that he meant Thursday. So I'll just say Thursday in Japanese and then he'll be like, oh yeah, right, Thursday. So I guess I know what the message is supposed to be. So sometimes I'll say what he's trying to say. I won't do it on anything too obviously controversial where I'm not 100% sure on what he's trying to say, but those little mistakes, or I might say, no, you mean Wednesday.
How interesting. Wow. Is there anything you think that has come from your, roots, jointly roots, right, in Japan and New Zealand, but I'm just pulling out New Zealand here, that's made it something a little bit easier for you to do your work in Japan? Is it understanding the coaches who are Kiwis? Is there anything there that you think is essential to part of your success as a translator here in rugby, the sport in New Zealand?
Yeah, this probably comes back to that why some people struggle a bit at translation as well. I think, that's what one of my biggest strengths is. I know rugby terms, I know rugby lingo, and because I played a little bit of rugby over here as well, I know what the language is in Japanese as well. And then I also know all the sayings and all the, things that the coaches will say. So if someone is saying to, kick her in the guts, then saying like, oh, let's call it a day. But someone, who learned English over here might, be like, why are you trying to kick somebody? The only female is Jess, why are you trying to kick her in the guts kind of thing. So I think knowing those terms, knowing all those jokes is something that's been very beneficial. And I think in terms of from both cultures, just being able to travel from New Zealand to Japan and back and forth has really taught me, I guess, to respect cultures a lot more, or to understand that there's differences in cultures. So that's something that I think even when I go traveling anywhere, I understand that there's a lot of different ways to do things because I've kind of experienced that firsthand. So when you're working with rugby teams in Japan, they're all run by companies, and there's a lot of rules that the companies have that are tied down to Japanese culture as well. So there's a lot of times when that's different to what the coaches or the players are used to. But just, I guess, having that understanding, knowing why that's happening, I can kind of use that in the translation, where the Japanese people probably don't think there's any need to explain why they're doing something because that's all they know, that's what they've always been doing. But if I can kind of layer a bit of that understanding into the translation, then it can make it a little bit smoother. So a few, I guess, things that have helped me just thanks to my, genes.
We've heard about this sort of coaches not being able to understand why they can't do this or why their players are not available for that or all of these things. But it comes down to these sort of unspoken rules almost that within the kaisha. What are some of those things that you can talk about that you've noticed coaches stumbling with, or, other translators might not know is a thing between the kaisha and the team?
Well, I think one of the, I guess, struggles is where the coaches are here as kind of experts in the field. The only reason why things like rugby have foreign coaches, and baseball doesn't, is because, rugby, as a lot of other countries have that expertise that maybe Japan doesn't have yet. So all those coaches, all those players are coming knowing that they're there to kind of support that or to help that, and they want to help it by doing it in ways that have worked in their country. So there's things that work in New Zealand, but as soon as you, I guess, come to Japan, the companies, running a business as well, they're trying to do it their way, but also they might not understand that success doesn't come automatically either. So then the coaches are trying to change things. The companies are saying, why would we have to do that when, the top teams aren't necessarily doing that, or, vice versa, or, that's not something that we do as a company. And then there might be frustration on, I can't do what I've been brought here to do, kind of thing. And then the companies, I think we've paid so much money for this person who isn't, helping us, kind of thing. So there's just those differences in understanding that can definitely cause friction. And what I've heard from things like baseball is, because I guess baseball has a bit of a draft system as well, but they can put money into things and or into their teams, and every year there's probably like, a pretty good chance that your team, I guess, can do well, or you don't know who's going to do well necessarily. So it's not always the same teams that are going to be winning, but in rugby over here, it's not quite at that stage or at that level yet. And I think business people at the top of the companies don't necessarily understand that. So if you're a team in third division in a cup game against, one of the top teams, your Kaisha, Shacho, your CEO is like, we've got to win this. And you're thinking like, our guys, they work 9 hours a day and then train afterwards, where they've got a personal masseuse each, or I don't know, something. So there's, I guess, those differences in understanding on both sides, which I think just makes it the wires don't necessarily align. But I think that's probably more the foreign coaches, the foreign players' job to come over. You're coming to a Japanese team, you're not coming to a New Zealand team that's based in Japan. So understanding that where you are and how people do things over here, and understanding why people do things is, it's worked obviously for, hundreds of years, 1,000 years. So it must be something that works over here. So you just, I guess, got to understand that.
Do most people then who are coaches who come here learn about Kaisha, about the importance of the company on the job? Is there not really a lot of that before they come here? I'm getting the feeling that maybe that's what happens. You arrive and you think, oh, I'm playing for X team. Wow, I know that brand. Great. But not knowing what that company stands for, its values, its vision, and all the other unwritten rules, right?
It's probably the agents and everyone would probably help them out in that respect, where you're coming to this country. The first thing that you probably get told is, you can't drink anything and drive over here, so be careful, kind of thing. Where in New Zealand, you can have a beer after work and still drive home or whatever. It's just those little things. And then also just, trying to teach people on the culture. But I think you can only tell people so much. I think the people that succeed, coaches, players, everyone, are people who are willing to learn and to embrace, and people who are coming over here not just because of the rugby or the pay packet. It's people who want to come here because they also, love the country, or they want to experience a new culture and they buy into that. I think so. Just that effort to want to buy in, or even just, to try to gambare, as everyone says in Japan, is probably the most, the biggest factor to if somebody's going to have a long career over here or not. Because not understanding the culture, that's something that people in Japan will understand. Like, they know that their culture is different to other people. It's probably something that people in Japan, or anyone in any country, will take pride in the differences that they have in their country. So it's not like people in Japan just think everyone's like this, why aren't you doing what we do? I think the biggest thing is when they just don't feel like you're trying at all. Maybe you're not trying to learn the language. You're not making an effort to, take your shoes off where everyone else is taking your shoes off. Just that effort really goes a long way. And that's something that people can understand, even if they don't understand what you're saying. So, just being able to give that effort, I think, goes a long way into succeeding over here. And everyone makes mistakes. So, it's not about having to get everything right. It's just about making the effort.
I have a question that my husband asked me the other day. and I'd like to ask you, if maybe you have some insights on this. Why are New Zealand players coming to Japan?
Mm-hmm.
What have you seen? Why would they choose Japan over France or UK or all those places where New Zealand players can go to play? Why are so many New Zealand players coming here?
I think, like in the past, it was always France, it was always England, and I think the money over there was obviously, pretty good. But one thing you hear from people who especially have experienced both England and Japan, or Europe and Japan, is just the distance is one thing. So you can get on one plane to get to Aussie or to New Zealand, or the time zones aren't crazy different either. So just being able to talk to your family at reasonable hours is a big one. And also the level of rugby as well. That's, you're not going over for a holiday. So if the rugby is not good, then you'd rather go somewhere where it's a different time zone, but you get to play a good level. But I think Japan rugby, with all the coaches who've come in, they brought in a lot of ideas. They've helped grow the game over here. The Japanese public has got more interest in rugby, so more players are joining. Yeah, it's just the level is going up. You've got more internationals wanting to come, and I think a lot of them might have experienced Japan in the World Cup. And when you come over as tourists, obviously, I think Japan's probably one of the best places to visit as a tourist. Everything, works, and it's all beautiful. Everything's, amazing. So I think that really being able to come over here, work by playing rugby and also living in Japan's a pretty big draw card. And then finally, the season in terms of the number of official games is less over here. So there's a lot more games you play in England and Europe. They've got a few different competitions, so you could be playing 30. I've heard even 40 games though. But our games before finals and promotion relegation games, we got 16 in the top division and then 10 in the second division. Then I think 15 in the third division. Yeah, so I think those are probably some of the reasons why, just as a guess.
Interesting, the different factors and the different situations, because we were looking at it going, well, the yen's not great. Why would you choose to come here? And I was like, well, distance obviously is really great. Yeah, there's a lot of other things that players have to consider when they're thinking about where they want to play outside of New Zealand. Thank you for giving us some insights on that, Doug, and how exciting Japan is the place to be at the moment.
I think, and all the players who, like South African players a lot, would go to Europe, but England has seen 3 or maybe even 4 teams go bust recently because they've all got private owners, and they have to file bankruptcy, and then suddenly you've got players who have a contract, but because the team doesn't have any money, you don't get paid. Where over here, because it's all with the company, we've had 2 teams over here in recent memory go bust, but all the players still get their contracts. If they want to stay in that city, they can't play rugby, but they'll still get paid the whole year. And then if they get a rugby gig somewhere else, then they have to give up that contract, obviously. But I guess that money, like the security of the money, is a big factor as well.
Wow. Okay, we're going to go in for the big question. Hold your breath or let it out. I don't know, but one big nugget, a gem that you can give us for really, from your own experiences, if you summarize it and think of one thing here to be really successful in Japan. You've talked about culture, and if you want to elaborate on that, that's great. But what do you think is really going to be very successful? One key tip for Kiwis coming into Japan to be successful in all that they do here.
Yeah, I think, well, when I was younger, I was always thinking, it's probably something that a lot of people have said on here, is just like, it's not what you know, it's who you know kind of mentality was always something that I didn't realize until I, met Tim, and then I got this job, and then Mitsubishi was through another connection. I was thinking, man, I've figured out life. And then I realized that that's what everyone, that's not a Japan thing, that's a everyone thing kind of thing. So yeah, that's something that I originally thought, but I think the biggest thing is what I said before about making the effort. So just understanding where you are. Japan's got a lot of things that are going well for it, a lot of things that, are different. Some things it does better than other countries, some things that it doesn't. But there's no, perfect country. It's just about understanding where you are, how things are happening. And I think Kiwis are, quite good in terms of quite laid back. So just being able to roll with the punches or going with the flow, something that I think Kiwis naturally do quite well. We're quite outgoing as well, though, and make friends. So everyone that I've known over here who are Kiwis, people who, teach English or anything, they're quite good at making that, I guess, community around them, which, because it can get quite lonely in Japan as well. I think it's not like New Zealand where you go to the supermarket and you can have a chat to the lady at Pack and Save while you're, doing things. I've been to some supermarkets where they say the yen price of every item that they're putting through just to, make sure that everything's going well. So
yeah, there's no room for chatting. They've got to
yeah,
say
yeah.
the price of every single item they scan for you. So
It's very, make sure that everything's perfect kind of thing. So I think they're both different levels of service. I like both of them, yes, but yeah, just being able to make life a bit more interesting over here while you're trying to do your thing. If you're over as a rugby player, like I said before, you're here as one of the experts in the field. But Kiwis, we've got a bit of a, I guess, negative thing of tall poppy syndrome in New Zealand. So people naturally, if around your mates, if you say you're good at something or you say competent about something, then you get cut down pretty quick, which is something I don't necessarily like about New Zealand. But when we come overseas, it gives us, I guess, that humility as well, where you might be the best or one of the best players in the world, but you come into a environment where people have only been playing rugby for a few years, but you don't look down on them. You look at them, I guess, as normal people. So I think just using those Kiwi qualities has definitely helped a lot of people over here as well. Even when I first came over, it was a bit lonely, not being able to make those connections with people, not getting invited to things where I normally would in New Zealand because it's not a thing that already happens over here. So yeah, just I guess making the effort in terms of the culture, but also about getting out there and I don't know, whatever you like to do, go to bars, go talk to people. After one beer, everyone wants to practice their English. So, it's very easy to make friends if you know how. So, yeah, I guess another ramble, but making the effort.
Thanks, Doug. Love your rambles. They're awesome. So you are a very funny and engaging host on your own podcast, Japan Rugby Weekly podcast. Woohoo!
Yes.
Tell us about your podcast. Yeah, how did this come to be? Why did you decide to do this? And how many millions have you made doing this podcast so far?
Yeah, I'm kind of just translating as a hobby now because it started, I want to say 2020. I think it was because of COVID when everything kind of shut down or slowed down, and a player who was at Coke, James Marshall, he's doing the What a Lad podcast in New Zealand, but he was at Coca-Cola for 2 seasons, I think, and he was kind of talking to me about how he went back to New Zealand. He retired from rugby and, had all those connections in rugby and wanted to use them to, I guess, help people understand what rugby players are really like behind the press conferences and stuff where people aren't allowed to say what they think, or they're not allowed to have a personality, and all they can say is full credit to the boys. And I was talking to him and we were kind of talking about how it's kind of similar in Japan, but there's even less, I guess, representation of rugby in Japan. So I originally started with a Japanese podcast, which after hours of thinking of a cool name, I finally thought of the perfect name, Doug's Rugby Podcast. And I just started by interviewing a few people at Coca-Cola where I was working. So we had one of the best refs in the country who was working for us. So I'd interview him and some of the players and some of the people I met at the Sunwolves rugby team and all that. So just trying to make people understand what the rugby players were like outside of the sport. And then a few of the players at Coca-Cola, we were again talking and we said, why don't we start one for, I guess, English listeners, because there was no news really coming out of Japan on the league, even though there were so many international players and the level was just rising. But I wouldn't say it wasn't because of lack of effort, but I guess it was just lack of know-how from the rugby union of how they can get the stuff out, or maybe they were just trying to focus on getting their domestic audience up first. But I just thought there wasn't enough going out to foreign listeners. So you should just go around to one of the guys' flats in Fukuoka where we were living, and every Tuesday we'd just get around a few mics and just talk about life and just talk about rugby. And it was something that we'd normally do in the locker room anyway. So we thought might as well just put a mic out. And I always joke about, making millions, but it's kind of just something that, I enjoy talking. It's one of the things I, talked about the favorite parts about being in a rugby team. So thought, if you can bring that kind of flavor to the public, then, that'll be great. And then Coke got disbanded as a rugby team, and suddenly I had all the gear and no friends. So I came up to Mitsubishi, and I thought I actually got a few messages from people overseas who were saying they were here for the World Cup and everything, and they, enjoyed being able to listen to the rugby news, and those people obviously weren't my mum or my immediate family. So I was like, oh, I better keep it going. So it's just been, I kind of, whenever I can, just getting episodes out and just trying to share as much so people can understand what's happening over here, what it's like. And then if we've got time, talk about convenience stores and stuff like that. And what it's like about
chicken and stuff.
The big questions.
Those are also the fun bits, right? That you add in your format. Too. We love those bits. And, the thing that always remains with me is that dunking the biscuits into the cups of tea. And that just, has lasted with me as one of my, one of those banters was really, really fun. And I still think of it and chuckle when I have something like that in front of me, right, with the cup of tea or coffee and a biscuit. And I'm thinking, I'm going to dunk this. I wonder what Doug would think. So you have to go and listen if you haven't heard the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast. It's super fun. And I think during the season, the Japanese season is when I started to get hooked on your show. And we've been following you also through Rugby World Cup, which has been awesome. Have you got a favorite episode that you've put out so far, or are they all pretty much super awesome and you can't say one is better than the other?
I've got 104 that are tied for first. No, I think
good answer.
I think you reminded me about the biscuit dipping, because it's not something that we didn't write in our notes. Okay, today we're going to talk about this. It's just I think we're having a cup of tea while we're doing it, and just all those kind of little parts where obviously you've got a few things that we decide that we want to talk about, but I don't like telling whoever's on to wait, you're going off topic, I think, because I'm the worst at going off topic. So I think those parts that are just genuine and things that we'd normally talk about, those parts that are great. But some highlights in terms of, like, at the start we had some pretty big guests on just because of some of the co-hosts that we had on at the time. We had a guy, William Tupou, who's at Toyota now, who played for Japan in that World Cup. So after the World Cup, he'd get us on the phone with guys like, Michael Leach and James Moore, who's another one who was on in the Japan team, and a lot of English-speaking Japan internationals, and just hearing, I guess, their stories. It's a lot more laid back and a lot more jokes, and those things I think were always fun. But I think just the little parts that we don't plan for are always my favorite bits, and it's hard because you can't plan for them. So sometimes they happen before I push record, and then sometimes they happen just after. But you get a few of them, so it's good.
So what future dreams do you have for the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast there, Doug?
I think
the millions.
The millions are obviously a given. It's that's gonna happen, I think, either through that, or I don't know, I'll make a Japan Rugby Weekly coin or something, a currency. But I think I never really started it as something to become something where I'm the next Joe Rogan, or something that can make it financially like my full-time job or anything, because I've got a job that I love. It's this is something that I guess I do that can help me with my job, so it just keeps me on top of following the news, following the updates, which is all stuff that can help with my work. But I think the biggest dream for it would just be to keep growing and getting Japan rugby as much exposure as possible. I think because the more Japan rugby's on the map, then the more it helps all the companies that are trying to stay afloat basically in Japan. I'm pretty sure none of them, or hardly any of them, would actually be making money from owning a rugby team. So they're going more and more professional. I think being able to give it that support to become more sustainable, something that would be great. And if while we're doing it, we can just get more people to love Japan and to love rugby, and to love the mighty DynaBoars, would be that's, I guess, as big as I'm thinking at the moment. But I know that the reason why I'm doing it is just to help Japan rugby, hopefully in any little way I can. So hopefully that happens.
And people are waiting for you too. I think that gives you a bit of a push along as well. You've got the fans who said, keep going. And the ones who comment, or the ones like us who are super fans, and we just love hearing each time you come out with one. So do keep going, and we look forward to keeping on promoting you and helping you out as much as we can as well. Any promotions or activities that you're doing at Japan Rugby Weekly? Is there anything that you want to do to help the listeners maybe come and support you? I see you've got a Japan Rugby Weekly t-shirt on yourself today. So
this actually it all started, I think it was last year on my birthday. My now wife just gave it to me for my birthday. She said, I made it at this website, and I was like, oh, that's cool. And then somebody else saw it and said, where can you buy those? So I thought, might as well make them available. So I think it's on the Instagram. There's a link, but if you want to wear something with the Japan Rugby Weekly logo on it, then you can get stuff there. Also have one of the original co-hosts, Joe Kamana, who is now at Santuri Sangoliath, is still playing rugby, but he's got a company that he made called Activate and Recovery Pro. They sell massage guns and a lot of things that kind of help people who need to prepare for training or recover afterwards. And he always thought that everything was so expensive that new players coming into the industry, they kind of struggled to get those things right, and getting those habits early can definitely prolong your career. So he wanted to make it a bit more affordable. So we've kind of sorted out a code. I think it's JRW15, and you can get 15% off. So if you're ever interested in any of those massage guns, or he's got a lot of stuff there. So
Great.
I think that's about it, I guess. We'll hopefully keep the podcast running for and no, I think once we get into season, it gets a little bit wobbly in terms of how the season schedule works, but I'll make sure I keep getting weekly podcasts out. So
ongoing.
Gambarimasu.
Wow, nice. Very good. Any last words to wrap up there, Doug, or any questions for us perhaps?
Well, I have always loved when I see the notification that you guys have got a new episode out, and can't remember where I first saw you guys. It might have been on Instagram, might have been from HBC, but Hayden. But I love what you guys are doing. Appreciate what you're doing and giving a voice to all the people, Kiwis, or Jandals, who are over here in Japan. But thanks so much for inviting me, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you guys. And no, thanks for supporting other people in Japan who are from Aotearoa.
Thank you. And I know you say arigats at the end of your podcast. So arigats to you, and congratulations. You are now a Jandal in Japan, a very successful one. Thanks for telling us your story about your work as a translator, and also on this podcast that you are running, Japan Rugby Weekly. Thanks, Doug.
Thank you so much. Arigats.
Wow, Doug the translator, what a good sort. I love listening to him talk, even though he always says he's talking too much.
Oh, awesome. What a job. I mean, he brought it today, that's for sure.
He did.
I need a rugby term for that. But anyway. So good, right? Yeah. I loved your question about where people are suited for translation or not. And, he really went into that quite in depth about shelving your knowledge that before coming to Japan.
Yeah, especially if you have rugby knowledge, right? That's not your business. Your business is to say what the coach is saying.
Yeah, even your strategy is different, your philosophy is different, your own ideas are different. Pop them away. You're on the job for the translation. I thought that was magic.
That has lost people their jobs, apparently. So, yeah.
Yeah, not sort of thinking, I know best. I think he meant to say this. right? Yeah, I thought that was great. And that sort of tied into the other comment he was making about the way that we do things in New Zealand. This is a Japan team, not a New Zealand team in Japan. Japan team in Japan, and being really conscious of that word kaisha, company, that's come up quite a lot, right? Jamie Joseph went into it in depth when we talked with him, and again, Doug did today. It was just incredible, right?
Yeah. It's the sort of things that you wouldn't know how to deal with because you wouldn't deal with these in New Zealand, but these are a fact of life of working, well, particularly in any professional team in Japan, because they're all owned by companies. So company first, and how that looks, and how you have to operate within that structure.
Yeah, we hear a lot about culture, don't we, from a lot of people on the podcast. I think everybody mentions culture. But again, I think with Doug, he's got another layer on there with rugby culture as well as knowing about Japan. He's got so many things, I'm sure, spinning around in his head as he's trying to do his efforts for translation. But that was it, wasn't it? Effort. That was one of his big takeaways, was the making an effort in Japan.
Just making an effort.
Get to know the culture. You don't have to do it perfectly, but get out there, make yourself part of it, and exhibit that humility, right, for things that you don't know. I remember coming to Japan thinking, I've done Japanese for 2 years. I've been a tour guide for so many years. I must know Japanese. When you get here, it's different. It's different. There are so many things you do not know, and just being like putting that aside, that humility has to come into play. Thank you so much, Doug, for bringing that out as well.
Awesome episode.
Very timely with so many players from New Zealand post Rugby World Cup. And coming into Japan shortly.
So follow the Japan Rugby Weekly podcast for all of your updates in English about what's going on. And we look forward to hearing, how things are going for the DynaBoars this season. Go DynaBoars.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening today.
We'll see you again soon.
Bye. Thanks for listening. Make sure you check out our guests' links in the show notes.
This podcast is brought to you today by Catherine O'Connell Law and Pod Launch with Jane. If you have a great story you think should be on the show, come and find us on LinkedIn or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you. See you next time.
Mata ne!